as we get a few people on. We will be picking up the second part of the Total Turtle Tote tonight, which is this pattern written by me. And one I'm working on is for a custom order from one of my customers, and it's very bee themed. Here is the top of my bag. Let it be. And what we're going to do last week when we started, we got the front of the bag done, not the back, but the front of the bag done, with our top stitching, our actual stitching in the ditch, which is where you stitch in the seam to hide your seam. And that makes it where this is very compact, and that made little pockets for the Peltex, which is what adds all the structure as to why this doesn't flop around. So the next part we're going to do is we're going to add our back, and then we're going to add our top. Now, previously, I've already marked the centers. As you can see here, that's what that little red mark on all four sides of tops and bottom. Here is my back pieces. And just like I said last time, I have my vinyl that has been basted with Insulbright. I have my lining fabric, which is the back of the lining. And then I have, just like for the rest of the bag, I have my Peltex. So we're going to get started here. We have our front. So to get started, I always start, this is my personally, you can start on either side, but I always start personally on the right hand side. We're going to pin our right side together of our vinyl. Let me grab some of my clips right here. Sorry for making you shake. But clip that. Now, I'm not going to stitch this yet. I'm just getting this clipped in place first. And then we are going to attach our lining to the same piece. Just I usually attach the hydro vinyl first. So make one thing, if you have directional fabric, make sure I am making the Total Turtle Tote, which is one of my patterns. It is a large tote. Specifically, I'll show you a completed one. This is a completed one. So it's pretty good size. This one specifically has a clear top. I Fortson. But so the biggest thing when you're adding your lining, if it is directional, is that you don't accidentally make it where it's upside down. So you see, I make sure to do that. Hi, Annette. Glad to see you back this week. I always, when I pin this, you want to pin it starting, or not pin it, clip it. You always want to clip it at the bottom, because whatever extra is left over after we attach our back is actually going to be trimmed off. So we are going to clip yeah, lining that was already there. Okay. And we're going to take this over the machine and sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will switch all over to the machine. So as you can see, I have my seam right here. We're going to sew this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, and we'll just go. And so you can go as fast or slow. Still working on the Total Turtle Tote from last week. This is the part two. My thread get caught on something. Gotta love when they do that, and it's just getting tight on you. Apologize for that. Hold on. Here we go. Got wrapped around the bottom of the spool. I was wondering why it was having issues. I am making a Total Turtle Tote, which is my pattern. You can go to sewingturtleboutique.net, and that is where you can find the pattern. This is a large tote. I designed this pattern originally to carry Copic markers. So now that we have, as you can see, the lining and our vinyl, we're going to pull that together. What I'm going to do now is top stitch that seam that we just made at 1/8 of an inch. And I said, speed is not a thing. So sometimes you'll see me go fast, and sometimes you'll see me go slow. Whatever you're most comfortable with. Considering my machine has a tortoise and hare setting, stays on the hair for the most part, but at least I can still control it. Thank you for the compliment. So now we have done our seam, and it is nicely top stitched inside and out. Now to do our next part, if you have not done your zipper pull, which like I said, make sure once you've finished the front, you always have both zipper pulls on. And we are going to do the same thing again. Oops. Apparently unplugged my light. Hold on just a second. Hitting things. Sorry about that. So we have our matching right sides together of the vinyl. Again, starting at the bottom. Now this is going to be a little more difficult than with the other side because we're going to have to bend the whole body back to get the lining to go right sides together. Okay, so we've matched our vinyls or the exteriors together. And if you see, I told you I cut about a 1/2 inch bigger, or at least the measurements for the zipper tape are always about 1 inch bigger, so there's about 1/2 inch extra. You can trim this off after we're done. I usually don't because it's going to be hidden in the seam. And that just means there's less chance that it would fray and come out of your seam. So in this case, we are going to form what I call my burrito roll. So I take it and I roll it up just so that I can take my lining right sides together. Like I said, this part is very similar in the construction to my cool cube pattern, except the burrito is a lot smaller than it is for this tote. Okay, So what we're going to do is now, so as you can see why I call it a burrito roll. So this is because it kind of is circular like a burrito. So we're going to take and sew this together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, yet again like we did the other side. What are you working on tonight, Annette? But after we finish this, we are going to top stitch this. However, it's a little bit different than it was previously. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim our thread. And so we have our burrito roll, but it is sewn as a seam. So what we're going to do is turn it right side out. That doesn't seem that difficult, but now we are going to top stitch it. And I'm going to tell you what I do because we are also going to need to baste at the bottom after we top stitch. You could do it as 2 separate stitches, but I do it in one step. So I'm going to prep it. So just to show y'all what I'm doing my top stitch again like I did the previous seam. Okay. Now I do go at a kind of a consistent pace, but not necessarily fast pace when I'm trying to top stitch my seams. So I have those nice, pretty seams. Okay, so I could stop here and actually finish that seam, or since I know I'm going to have to anyways, I need to baste the bottom of my 2 layers together. So I just pivot my machine and baste it together at an 1/8 seam allowance, making sure my fabrics are even. Like I said, this can be made out of woven completely, especially with the stabilizer we're putting in. Okay, so now we have, well, that sounds cool. I love Halloween. That's my favorite holiday. Not a quilter though, so I've only done a handful of things quilted. So we have our other side. So I'm going to flip the camera around. Okay, so we now have our back attached, but you see it's still open back here. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I've got my Peltex. I'm going to slide it in. That's one reason we went ahead and basted our bottom. So we can go ahead and slide this in, and then we can close it up. Now, I will tell you occasionally when you're cutting these things that you will cut it a slight smidge too big or too tall, and it's never a problem to figure out how much off you are. Like you saw me do last week, I took it back to the table because apparently I had made it about a 1/4 inch too tall. So don't be afraid to make mistakes in that regard. Right now, I'm just pushing it, and I'm actually got it where it lays flat. I'm actually going to take and trim off just a tad. It won't be quite as tight. Just trimming off about 1/8 of an inch, as you can see. Never, as more probably the other way around for me. When I make bags too long, I take a break and I make some historic doll clothing. That's my kind of reprieve. Actually, I'm planning one in the near future. I've got all my materials here, so I'm excited. So, as you can see, there's about 1/4 inch above the zipper tape. I'm gonna go take this over to my cutting table and I'm gonna take my ruler and lay it flat and trim it off. So put my ruler from here to here and trim it down. And now you noticed I already put my Peltex in. That's not a play in this one way or the other because it is short enough that it's not in that seam allowance or anything like that. So like I said, I'm just going to take it. You can see me over here. Let's take my ruler. I love when things get buried under things. We're just going to trim it down. And I'll come and show y'all about how much I trimmed off. And like I said, in my pattern, I put that it could be anywhere from it could be perfect, could be a perfect match and everything like that, and you don't have to worry. But that doesn't happen very often because, and the biggest reason is because all zipper tapes are different sizes, and that's the main reason. But that is the biggest reason is that summer ween. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of the summer ween stuff too, but um, I've already started wearing some fall and Halloween stuff. But just to show you, this is how much I trimmed off. You can see all my layers and everything like that. It's not a lot. Like I said, it's about 1/4 of an inch. Some zipper tapes, even they all say number 5. Some can be a lot bigger than others. So that's why I say, even in my pattern, I say between 1/8 and 1/4 inch is what you'll trim off. So now you can see same size. So what I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch that close. Okay. So I'm gonna move y'all back to the machine. Bag making just takes time, and it's best to do like little simple bags just to get over your fear of each of the things as you go. I consider most of my bags pretty beginner friendly. Probably the hardest one would be my gamer's night out wallet because of all the curves and the different techniques of zippers. But no, I've been sewing project bags again all day. So I have a different order that I'm working on. Still fall stuff, but that scooted its way up. I love when Peltex moves while you're basting something shut. Like, why is that Peltex all the way up here in the corner? I've been sewing with vinyl probably for about the last 5, 6 years. Still a relatively new experience. And See, you don't always catch everything. There's my lining that decided not to get caught in that basting. So I go back and do it again. Probably when I was messing with that Peltex. See, that caught everything that time. Yeah, that did. All right, so now our next thing is to mark our centers of our bag. So I'll move y'all over here again. So we've already marked the centers on the top of our bag. So now I am going to, the best way to mark the centers on this is to match up your seams. So we're going to match up that back seam and we're going to mark our front and back. Woo! I'm trying to drop it apparently. And I always mark it on the lining side because since I'm putting right sides together, that's what I see when I'm doing it. So we are marking our center. It, and our seams up here should match as well. And they do. So I'll mark my center here. And yes, I do. For those who have not been here before, I do use HB to mark my centers because hold on. Let me get my silver marking pen so I can actually see it on the zipper tape. Or so should I say my silver Sharpie? Because I'm on navy blue, so you don't actually see it. So you can see it really well there. So I'll go ahead and do this next one next. Now, I never like when I'm marking centers to have my zipper holes right dead center because then they get to be in the way. So you mark your centers, you not mark, match your centers that you previously marked. And then you're going to, on the top and bottom, but I'm just going to do the top right now. I'll do them in a minute with my other color. Okay. I'll do that on the bottom as well. Just get my red Sharpie back so it shows up better. So I match up my centers again. And see if you also want to make sure you're correct. Your seams will match up again. It's a little harder to show when there's a zipper tape. So hope you're doing well this week, Melody. Okay. So all our centers are marked. And so we've done it for the top and bottom. We're only doing the top tonight, but that just preps things for in the future. Hey, so is my little thing? A little stapler. They like to disappear when, of course, when you need them. And I said, and yes, you did hear me correct when I said stapler. There it is. So y'all seen me before when I've done these. This is my little handy dandy. This is a mini stapler. I have more staples here as because I will need them. This is by Tim Holtz that I use. So we are going to attach it our top to our body. This is what I call the body. Now, when we attach, this is direction well as the print inside. Well, so I want when I lift up the lid that it's going to have that, or on the inside it'll have that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make matches up with the back. It also means when you And if you want to double, this is the back of your bag. You can fold it up and you'll see that it's the same direction. That sounds like fun. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to staple my corners, and I'm going to do clips as well, mainly because I don't want things to come out, and they like to with this big bag. So we are going to get our centers. And of course, I do one staple. And of course, I'm out of staples. Didn't check. Sounds like a fun party. Okay, there we go. I was like, why is it not coming out? See, I told y'all I would need staplers. Just didn't think it would be the second staple. All right, so now that we got it back together, let's match up those centers yet again, which is fun because we just did that. Okay. Like I said, because this is a larger bag, a lot of times I will staple and clip just to show you I'm doing both. Because sometimes your staples can pop out, and so the clips just kind of hold them in place a little bit better. It's because I'm maneuvering it around. And so when I do this, I always do the four centers first. Okay, where's my center? Right here. So I will just clip and you put one clip over here where I just stapled. Now I don't always clip all the way around. It's mainly those 4 points. And then I staple down. Oh, I love this little stapler. It's been a game changer since I started using it. Certain materials, I need a bigger stapler because the materials are too thick. But since, especially if I was using waterproof canvas here instead of the woven, I would need something a little more substantial than the little mini staples. But not sure where it's at the moment. But I have a regular stapler I keep around here as well. It's not as easy to get in the corners though. Thank you. Appreciate that. I try to give you all the tools I've learned over the last few years, or the last 15 years or something like that, since I started sewing. Actually, this year it'll be 16 years that I've been sewing. So, started sewing when my teenager was about a year and a half old because I wasn't happy with the quality of the clothing at places like Belks and stuff for fancy dresses. I said I wanted to learn how. So, like I said, I'm just going around four sides, stapling it together. And I know I'll have people ask me about how do you get the staples out? Well, I'll tell you what I used to do before I found this little handy dandy thing. This is a little staple remover that I use. Before that, I use needle nose pliers. So if there's a will, there's a way. The biggest thing is just to make sure you take those staples out. before you put your binding on. Because where it's going to become a problem is you're sewing that binding on and not know where your staples are, and you're going to hit one while stitching it down. Thank you, Annette. I'm glad that I've been helpful. The needle nose pliers work fine. It's a lot easier with this staple remover, especially when you remove enough, it becomes slightly magnetized here. Okay, so I have stapled everything. You see, I've got 4 clips on the corner, on the centers, just to make sure that everything kind of holds in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it down at my machine and sew. And as you can see, there's the inside. Now the thing is with this is that brain's not wanting to work. Make sure it's right. Yeah, that's right. We're going to start sewing in the middle of the back. Point being is that it's easier to start here than it is to start in the middle of the zipper. We're starting where it's just the 2 pieces of exterior and your lining together, not zipper tape, because that makes it a little more difficult when you're attaching it. So I'm going to turn you to the sewing machine and we're going to sew our way around, and then we'll remove our zippers, our staples, and then we'll do binding for this side. And that's probably all we're going to get to tonight. And then next week we'll attach the handles and the bottom, because the handles are a little bit more involved, and that's where we'll start out next week. But I will have things, I can tell you some of the things you will need for next week to do the handles. I'll go ahead and flip y'all around. All right, so we got my nice big tote. Okay. So we are sewing this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, when you do put staples, sure you are stapling them in no more than about 1/8 of an inch. Otherwise, when you're doing this seam, you're going to hit one. Okay, we're sewing a little bit at a time as I go through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that down and kind of rotate my big bag. And I go very slowly around the corner so I can kind of make sure that around this corner that the zipper tape doesn't get a wrinkle in it or anything like that. Okay. Because all you need is a wrinkle at the back of your zipper tape. That means your zipper won't zip or unzip correctly. So I do go slowly to make sure everything's still at that 1/4 of an inch. Make sure that my top and my zipper tape are still equal to each other. So I don't go super fast at this step. This is where you'd easily make a mistake and it cost you trying to get your binding on, going around the zipper. Now we're getting to a point. I'm going to go around this first curve and we're going to talk about the first hurdle you'll face with this. Or not the first corner, the second corner. So I told you that I put my zipper pulls towards the center. I don't like them in the straight center for like when we're pinning and stuff like that. We're turning around one more corner, but I want to get around the second corner before I deal with zipper pulls. A little bit too far right there. Now, I don't want you to stress if your zipper tape is not exactly flush with your exterior material, because what's going to happen is we're going to trim off the corners. I have that built into the pattern, so that is not an issue. It will not come up. So we are going to go around, and I'm going to go a few inches down close to where my zipper pulls are. But before I get to my zipper pulls, and so if you're watching, zipper pulls are right here. I'm just getting a few inches from my. All right, so we're right at the zipper pull. So what I'm going to do is going to lift up my presser foot, and I'm going to scoot this pulls past my presser foot. So it will already be in the part that we've already sewn. This makes things a little interesting because it's a tight fit. See, first zipper pull is done. Now we'll just move the second one. So this one's trying to be a little more difficult. There we go. So it's just getting the right angle. So as you can see, I have moved my zipper pulls back to the back corner that I just passed. So now what we're going to do is we are going to continue sewing all the way around. As you see, this process really doesn't take long. It's just more, this is a cumbersome bag. That's probably the best way because it's big. Great for carrying lots of things. Like I said, my customer is using this for Copic markers. She actually has a stand that you can carry like 300 Copic markers in, and it fits in there. This is like the fourth or fifth one of these I've made for customers who also are part of a group they get together and do, and one saw one, and they keep sharing my information. So gotta love customers who share your info, not complaining. Plus, like I said, this is my pattern. I enjoy doing this pattern. We've got one more corner left after this. We've gone around 3 corners. So we've got one more corner and half the back to go around. There any type of patterns y'all are interested in me possibly making? My mother-in-law wants me to make a bag similar to one that she bought 30 years ago, and it carries tons of things. Would there be any interest in stuff like that? Y'all just need to let me know. All right, so we're almost all the way back around. That's our last corner. Oh, oh, all right. So we have sewn. Okay, so it's definitely one worth pursuing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove, well, actually, first thing I'm going to do, we are going to go around each corner. If I have any excess exterior, so just to show y'all what that looks like. So you have a little bit of the vinyl from the exterior around the tape. So I'm just going to trim up next to the zipper tape to trim off the excess. I do have a small crossbody bag. I've never written, well, I've got it written down. So when I write patterns, y'all be kind of laugh because most of my patterns are just a list of measurements. I don't expand on them past that. So as you see, there's not usually a lot to trim off, just a little curve. All right, so I've trimmed off one last little bit, and I've trimmed off all four corners. All right, so now I'm going to take my little handy dandy staple remover and remove all the staples in this bag. But I need to do it from the side I put them in because since these are small staples, it's easy to miss them. I mostly carry crossbodies or the little backpacks. That's what I like myself as far as pocketbooks go. Right, so we're just working our way across. Now, I did make sure before we started doing all this that I had a full bobbin because I've done this part and stitched it and realized I'm sewing around with nothing and I have to go back and do it all over again. That's not fun. This top part where you're having to go around zipper pulls sounds fun. I'm gonna be making my project bags, the stow and go bags. I can show you all the ones I've been working on. I've got two. I have cross stitch shop monthly bags too, and I've got my September and October bags for her. I'm working on. Getting all those done. One last side. I am here. I'm just trying to take off the zippers. I'm not zippers, staplers, staples, not staplers. That doesn't work very well, does it? Can't take a stapler off. I make a lot of 120% halves for myself if I need something smaller. They're too small for a day-to-day basis. All right, so for this, we have it fully attached. So now we're going to add our binding. Okay, so just so you can see, it is directional. Now, I have binding that I've got pre-cut. Now you can use pre-made binding. I specifically like to have, especially when I have a woven, I make it out of the material I have it out of. So what you need to do, especially woven, you need to fold over about a half an inch to an inch, and just to give you that nice finished edge. Now, because this is a bigger bag, this is the length of my width of my fabric, which is a 45 width fabric. That's not going to be big enough to go all the way around this. So I will join it in the middle with another piece of binding. And that will be enough. I have 3 pieces of binding I've cut. That's enough for my top and bottom. So if you're using something that, now if you're using something that is you're still pushing it on that, so you may want to make sure you have 3 cut just to be on the safe side, or it's like 56 or 60 wide, because it's going to be a tight fit, and it's better to have a little bit of extra and not need it than to need it and not have it already prepped and ready, and then you have to go stop and cut and everything like that. So I always cut me 3, no matter if I'm doing it out of waterproof canvas or woven. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start at the back again. And we're going to attach this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I want to make sure that's same direction. So I'm actually going to fold over the other end, which is fine because it doesn't matter which one I have a raw edge for. And let's see. Trying to make sure that's correct. May have had it right the first time. All right, I did have it right the first time. Just didn't look right to me. All right, so I'm going to flip y'all around. I said you don't have to, with it binding, it doesn't have to be directional. I'm just being extra here. All right, so I'm going to take, and I'll put it about at my center mark. And we're sewing this on at a 1/4 inch yet again. Now this is a little easier in some ways, a little harder in others. So we can go all the way around. So as you see, I'm just taking it as I go around. Where this will run out is about a third to halfway through that next to last side. And you ask how I know, because I've done this multiple times. And I said, just for customers, I think this is like the 5th or 6th one of these I've made. Then I've made one for myself as well as for while writing the pattern. So I've made this pattern enough to know where it ends up, especially with the 45 wide material. Like I said, I'd rather have a little bit of extra, not having to get up in the middle of my sewing than not need to. So now, when we sew the other side of the binding, it will become a little easier at times, but right now, basically this is like sewing around the first time. You just have to kind of make sure that everything's laying flat so you don't have any weird clumps in your zipper tape. because if you do, then it will affect how your zipper zips and unzips. And speaking of which, I need to move my zipper pulls back out of the way so I can go around a corner. You don't want to try to move zipper pulls around a corner before you get there. Let's just say I've done it before. It a pain in the rear. Let's put it nicely. So we have and like I said, I just go slowly around. Like I said, we're just gonna finish the binding for the top, and then we will next week pick up, do our handles, which I will go over how I made, but I've already made them because if I were using webbing, I would not be showing you how to make anything. I would just be using webbing. So I made the handles and I'll explain what I did next week when I'm showing you how to put it on. So we are going around that corner, that first or second corner. Now I do binding a little different than a lot of people. So as you can see, I'm starting to get to the end of my thing, but it was not a bad thing to already have the other end already. And so as you can see right here, there's my zipper pulls again. So what I'm going to do is lift up my presser foot and move those little zipper pulls past my presser foot. Like I said, this is one of the more difficult parts right here, but it's not an issue. It just takes a little maneuvering. Oh yeah. And so we have moved the zipper pulls. As you can see, they're no longer there. So make sure you put your presser foot down because if you don't, you're going to have loops on the bottom. I've done it enough times. And I realized, wait, that doesn't sound quite right. And then I have to go take out stitches, and that's a pain in the rear. And then I have to do it all over again. So better to double check that you've put your presser foot down when you're doing this. So we're working our way around. The biggest thing I'm concerned about is with this binding is that when I'm running towards the end, that I don't run out on the corner because then that's harder to join it. But I have figured out that it usually runs out about halfway through the next to last side or the last side if you don't count the back. So if I started anywhere other than the middle of the back, then I would run out. So as you can see, it stops about right here, which to me is a good spot for it to have a basically a jointure. So we have our around that third corner. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to have that folded again, like kind of like we did at the beginning, so you have no raw edge. I'm going to go ahead and grab my next thing of binding. And I'll show you what this looks like once I get off the machine. Go ahead and trim thread back here. It's not in my way in a minute. So I want to have an overlap of about an inch. So I go about twice the length of that fold. Because like I said, I usually fold over about half an inch. So I do that before I would get up to there. So it's just sitting right where I want it. Now, one thing you can do is stitch all the way till you get to the end of this one and then stop, go back, and then start again. But I'm trying to save myself a few steps. You don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. You, like I said, you can stitch until you're completely run out of the binding. Just make sure that you fold it over so you don't have a raw edge. I am stitching it at the same time so that I don't have to stop. I will do an extra like reverse stitch right here just to kind of strengthen it. Instead, I do a little bit of a reverse stitch right here because I know I've gone over that fold. And I will show you what I mean about how it overlaps. And you will not notice if you've done bias binding on like quilts when you have to join it. Yes, you join it up on the bias. I don't worry about that for this because I don't make true, I could make true bias binding. However, I do not for these totes. I do not find that is necessary. But you can if you want to make true bias binding, or if you want to use pre-made binding. I've done both, as well as just cutting it to the size I say to cut it in the pattern. And I use this size every single time I sew this, so I sew it a lot. All right, so we are almost to where we started. Right, almost there. So the big thing is just to make sure that our fabric equals out and overlaps by about an inch or so. Basically, just so that we can have a nice clean seam when we finish. All right, so there is our point where we have gone past about that inch. I'll do my reverse stitch. Fabric, I've used it some, but it just depends. I usually use the material that I'm using for the lining. So you can see I used about half of a strip. So if you want to see, this is the seam that's in the middle of a fabric. I used just a little bit shy of that, so I know I definitely have enough for the other side. So I'm gonna turn y'all this way for just a minute. So just to show you where we joined it on the side, you're gonna have that nice pretty seam, no raw edges, or anything like that. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm going to fold up my fabric, random threads that went and escaped through there from the raw edges of the fabric. See, since I'm using the same material, I did want to make sure that my directions were the same, even if they aren't exactly matching it. Do want to make sure they go the same direction. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to fold over by a quarter of an inch and by a quarter of an inch. So just to show you, fold it over so there's no raw edges, and then I fold that over the seam and over my stitching. Now here's just where I use my little clips. Tuck any raw threads or anything like that in. I clip all the way around. I'll do that on the other side just a little. Flip it. Gotta love when things shift when you move them around. So we're just gonna do, now I'm not purposely, I'm going to kind of fold around the corner, but it will be slightly different going around the corners. I've heard people use pull fabric though for that. I just don't normally. I have used it before um for one of my brain's not wanting to think what it's called. Uh my treat tote. Um because I made it with pull for the lining because I wanted it food safe so I could put cookies in it, Christmas cookies. So I am folding and folding it over. I will show y'all what this looks like. I gotta get me some more clips. So, well, yeah, I can understand that. I use waterproof canvas a lot because it doesn't fray, and that's why. Now, this is definitely fraying, as you can see on my little threads. But since they're tucked in, it doesn't really bother me. Doesn't usually affect how it goes. So, and sometimes I have the stray threads who try to peek out. I just push them back in, and I usually don't have an issue. So, thank you. I appreciate that. You get an image in your head or try to describe it to a customer. It doesn't always translate well, but we should be able to finish next week. I just may move y'all locations um, in between the middle to show y'all to put on the rivets and stuff to put on the handles, and then move y'all to the sewing machine to finish up the bottom. Okay. Sorry, it's just trying to watch it fold. Almost got it there. One last side. One last small side. Yeah, I like how it's turning out. There, I had a really scraggly part, so I cut it off. Well, that's why I do it with stitchingly being because of how much weight this can hold. That adds a lot of strength to it. But yeah, so there we have our clips, and there's to do that with the top up. We're going to start at the back again. And then when we get past the first corner, we're going to change things up a little bit. I'm going to move you to the sewing machine again. And I go back a little bit from the center, mainly so that I can catch that part already that has the where the two joint. That's why I'm kind of holding it in place since I took that clip out. Okay. Yeah, I add rivets a lot. But we're almost done with where we're going to be done for tonight. Sorry, my headphone died on me. Had to switch headphones out on me. Okay, and we around this corner. Going a little bit around the corner. I make sure everything lay flat. And yes, I do have my hand inside there, kind of holding it in place. And after I get about 2 or 3 inches to where that I could unzip, I'm gonna get through that first half of the side. I'm going to unzip my bag on both sides, all the way to the back. And this is so that I can make it sewing this binding on a lot easier. I'll show you what I mean. So now that I have that, I'm opening my zipper. I'm gonna do that on the other side as well. Apparently I missed a thread over here from when we did our stitch in the ditch. So I'm opening up my zipper. There we go. And ta-da, it lays flat. All right, so we lay it nice and flat up against the bed of the machine. And the body is not in our way right now. So if you can't have already told, I am going to be using gold rivets to match the gold hardware and zipper tape and all that stuff. So now the biggest thing is when you come up to this corner, since it's unzipped, you need to make sure that you fold it in so you don't accidentally sew it down because you will have to take it out otherwise. Now, when I'm sewing the binding over like this, I am sewing a 1/8 of an inch from the fold. So, like I said, I go a little slower around the curve, especially with that zipper tape kind of sticking out. So I hold it down as I go around the curve. Move some clips out of my way. Now you can't do this once you're trying to add it on the bottom because you can't zip a solid piece. But but you also don't have zipper pulls you're dealing with either. So it has its trade-offs. All right, so we're around that corner. So I just make sure my zipper tape is flat. I said I had a random thread there. Okay. So you can see here's the body of our bag back here. I love when binding wants to do its own thing. So like I said, I push it under there. I'm gonna go rotate that next to last corner. The last corner where the zipper tape is exposed. Okay. See, it's easy to keep our zipper tape nice and flat on a flat surface, not going around a curve. Okay. And I just, so this, we'll get ready to go around our last curve for the binding. So I'm going to maneuver everything around because we are getting back to where we have a back. All right. Have to make sure the pull is out of the way because it is sitting back here at this back corner. You do not want to hit that pull with your needle. You will break it and possibly do damage, whether to you or the bag. I've done both. It's one of the few times I actually had a needle break off and fly at me, and it makes me glad I had glasses on. So I actually use my staple remover as a way to hold my binding in place to go around this curve when I don't want to possibly run over my finger. So another use for the staple remover, right? Hold on a second. Did not catch. I've got to pull out a few stitches. Gotta love when your binding shifted. So see, even I have where I use the little seam ripper. So it happens to the best of us. Yeah, I can see where I took a little jaunt upwards and stuff, right? Everybody has to use their dreaded seam ripper at some point or another. There we go. Pull that out. Okay. It's like that didn't look right. So I'm actually, to make my life a little simpler, I'm gonna zip it back up to go around that corner. So I don't have to deal with the zipper pull since it was giving me issues more than normal. All right. So just so I don't have the bulk of having to deal with the zipper pull coming around, sometimes you can stop and do that. So what I'm going to do is pick back up where I used my seam ripper to. Yeah, definitely laying a lot flatter and less issues. And sometimes you just have to stop and go, okay, don't beat yourself up about it. Just handle it as things come. Yeah, rivets can add a lot of style. Chicago screws. Some people prefer to use Chicago screws over rivets. Actually have some rivets. They're no longer made, but that are Mickey heads rivets. And I like those. All right, so we have made it almost all the way around. That's a good thing to be completely fine with ripping out stitches. That's the thing. People don't realize you don't have to be perfect right away. You can make mistakes because everybody's going to make mistakes no matter how senior they're at doing this. Okay. I trim my seam allowance, trim my threads, back the one I just had to redo. I said, there's nothing to be disappointed about if you have to take something out. Better take it out, have it be right, than have it. Right. So we have completed this top. So the best way to do this is if I double check is I turn it right side out. It will have to be wrong side out again to do the bottom, but at the to do the handles, it needs to be right side out anyway. So at this point, right now, I'm just double checking that everything zips well, doesn't get caught, snag, or anything like that. And I do it from both sides. See, unzips and zips, no issue, both ways. So we have our let it be. Now, it is not facing the right direction if I wanted it to look at it towards the zippers. But if I unzip it, then it is the same direction as that. And it is right side up when I lift up the lid. And that's what I wanted. So we have our completed top. And that is where we are going to stop for tonight. It doesn't all look good with it. I will pick this up next week. And just to show y'all, this is one of the prints I'm making for a project bag right now. Isn't it cute? Your little apprentice probably could handle the stow and go bag pretty easily. And that would help her build some confidence as well. But I will see y'all next week and talk to y'all later.